Hare Krishna Jivani, looking very especially nice this morning. Leave the meeting. This meeting is being live streamed. By staying in this meeting, you consent to being live streamed. Anyone with access to the live stream can watch or share with others. Got it. Okay. Jivani, I forget, where are you stationed? Is it South Africa or South California? Go ahead and turn on your microphone. Ask to unmute. There you go.
Если я Краснодар.
Say again?
Краснодар, Russia.
Oh, you're in Krasnodar, Russia. Well, здравствуйте. And здравствуйте to all my tovarish over there in Russia. You know, I love the Russian people. They're very beautiful, warm human beings. And I've mentioned this before, but I studied Russian in high school. And as you know, anything you study in high school is something you'll forget and never really learn. But I learned to sing a couple of Russian songs, you know, like Ocha Chornya, Ocha Strasnya, like that, you know. And I had a girlfriend in my Russian class. So we used to speak Russian together. It was all very romantic. We saw Dr. Zhivago, and then there was a 9-hour production of Voyny Mir, you know, War and Peace. So I read Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. And Tolstoy really impressed me. Dostoevsky and Tolstoy are very interesting writers. Dostoevsky explores the human soul. He's really interested in that. Whereas Tolstoy, he gets more into religion and politics, and later creates his own vegetarian ashram, you know, where he's kind of interested in yoga, and he corresponds with Gandhi. And that part of Tolstoy fascinated me. And I found that he was interested in Gandhi, and Gandhi had read Thoreau, who was an American anti-war transcendentalist. He decided he didn't like, the sort of capitalist, consumerist society. He went off to live on a tiny farm in the middle of nowhere called Walden. And he sat there and contemplated winter time and acorns growing on oak trees. And when he got bored, he had a friend at Harvard or Cambridge, one of those, may have been Emerson, sent him a big trunk full of books. And among the books were the Vedas and the Puranas and the Bhagavad Gita. And he began reading the Bhagavad Gita. And he thought, this is amazing. This is really profound. And that strengthened his idea of living in harmony with the universe, and the fact that really for advanced human beings, war is not the way to peace. Although we will hear that explained to us by many propaganda outlets, that if you really want peace, you have to have war. So much so that Orwell in 1984, he created these propaganda principles. Freedom is slavery, war is peace, knowledge is ignorance, that were to be repeated endlessly until everybody believed them. And he wasn't really joking around, Orwell. That was back in 1948, and his book was called 1984. But you can see how today we very much believe that war is peace, knowledge is ignorance, and freedom is slavery. But anyways, so I read Thoreau, and I thought, well, if this man is reading the Bhagavad Gita, why not me? I should read the Bhagavad Gita. And I found that the Bhagavad Gita was a common principle in the teachings of and the writings of Thoreau and later Tolstoy, and later Gandhi. Gandhi picked up on the fact that Tolstoy had studied Thoreau and the Bhagavad Gita. So anyway, when I was a kid, I read all these things. Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. But then I thought, I have to go to the source, and the source is Bhagavad Gita. So together with Braja Sundari here at Bhakti Online, we created a commentary that ran to about 1.5 years. I don't know how long that is, on the Bhagavad Gita. I was speaking every Friday like this. Braja Sundari told me that in Israel, they have this tradition that people get together on, I think it's the Shabbat, to discuss the scripture and its meaning. And she said, would you like to do something like that? And I said, that sounds like a good idea. Why don't we do the Bhagavad Gita? So every week we met like this on Zoom. And I tried, initially my idea was to do a chapter a week. And I was told Madhusudan Maharaj would do 6 chapters and Devashish Prabhu would do 6 chapters. And I thought, well, I'm only responsible for 6 chapters. I'll do 1 a week. And got through the first chapter and an introduction pretty quickly. And I thought this is going to go very fast. But when I got to the 6th chapter, I was encouraged by Madhusudan Maharaj to continue. He's quite a preacher and travels around the world and has many projects. He said, I like what you're doing. Other people like it. So why don't you continue? And that turned into 1.5 years of Zoomcast, podcast, whatever we're doing, Zoom Loka, the crazy world of Zoom. And so here we are today, and I'm reading the Prapana Jivanamritam. We're talking about rejection of the unfavorable. And as anything in Sanskrit, there are subtleties in translation. Really, what's being said is pratikulyasya varjanam. Let go of those things that are not helpful to you. So this is not for us to rub into the eye of our friend, telling them, look, you're not doing this properly. These are the rules. That's not the proper function of Vaishnava devotees, to be holier than thou and sanctimonious and explain to other people how to do things. And that's not my function here. So my own example is not a perfect one. But pratikul is interesting. Prati means it goes against, and kul is like cultivation. Like we have Guru Kul, which is the school that young people go to get instruction from their master or teacher, Guru Kul, the cultivation of the Guru's teachings. So kul and cultivation kind of go together. And before we discussed what's favorable or anukul, and now we're discussing what's unfavorable for the practice of love. And, if you think about love, there's all these self-help books, especially for the ladies, but for couples, how to avoid problems in your relationship, what things are good, what things are bad if you want to have a successful marriage. How to go about doing that, So what's unfavorable for love has really been well discussed and spoken of by many experts. So what are some unfavorable things? Well, being filled with guilt, being filled with shame, worrying all the time, overthinking. Srila Sridhar Maharaj mentions before atyahara prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha. For example, over collecting. In the modern context, that would be like over shopping. So if you're a shopaholic, that will kill love. Your husband won't like that if you're constantly spending all the money, obviously. So in a sense, what's being given in this book, these are very obvious points. They don't really need so much explanation by someone like me. Atyahara also means overeating. So there's so many diet books. Watch your weight. Don't eat too much. Eating too much is not good for you. So like I said, these are obvious points. Anger. Kama esha, krodha esha. Avoid anger. Vacho vegam, manasa, krodha vegam. Krodha. It means anger. Anger is terribly destructive. Krishna Chaitanya Das from UA, he comments, yes, shopping kills love. Remember that, ladies. Shop, but it's not just the ladies. Men collect as well. My father-in-law, in Spanish we say suegro, he has a shed out in back of the house, and it's just filled. You can't open the door. Literally, you have to open the door a little crack and then try to move things behind the door, and then a little crack and then move things. And there's a ladder, and you can take the ladder out and open the door all the way. And it's just filled with wrenches and nuts and bolts and strange contraptions and mechanics, tools, and apparatus, because during his life, he never stopped collecting tools. Now we can't use that space because it's filled to the roof with iron tools. And his wife, my dear mother-in-law, she was always upset when he would come home with some new tools. So men collect things, women collect things. This tendency to over-collect is not good for love. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Bhaktivinoda Thakur have pointed out, and we mentioned this in our earlier talk, knowledge is kind of the same thing. Today, we tend to collect little bits of information, little facts, chia is good for you, cholesterol is bad. And we fill our brains with all these factoids. But in the end, you still have to confront the problem of mortality. Everybody's fascinated with the Titanic. It's such a great story. Jack and Rose. Jack died for love. Millionaires on an impossible mission to get to New York on an unsinkable boat that even God himself could not sink. What hubris. Hubris is an element of Greek tragedy where human pride believes that we can challenge the gods. So they challenged the gods in the Titanic, and they paid for it by going to the bottom of the sea. And now you can pay $250,000 to visit the ruins of the Titanic. And this group of rich millionaires constructed a special bathysphere with a carbon fiber hull and descended 13,000 feet under the sea to visit the remnants of the Titanic. And you can imagine they're looking out the little porthole and thinking, oh, these people were fools. They thought they could defy the laws of nature. How silly of them. Let's take photos and put it on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. And just as they're doing that, they hear a sound. And the little boy on the trip, he's 19 years old. He didn't want to go. He told his daddy, I don't want to go to see the Titanic. Please, Daddy. I have a girlfriend. I have my studies. And the father was from Pakistan, rich millionaire. He said, no, you will be a man. You will come with me. We're going to see the ruins of the Titanic. It will be a great event. You'll become a man. And now they're approaching the wreck and they hear a sound, a deafening noise, some kind of a crunch as the steel hull is caving in and imploding from the pressure. And oh no, and that's it. Their life was finished. So what good is all our knowledge? What good is collecting and collecting all these different kinds of collections? Rupa Goswami tells us this is not really so favorable for love. You're interested in love. And don't overshop. Don't overshop for knowledge. Don't overeat. Atyahara prayasascha. Don't have big projects. Sometimes a big project can kill devotion. I think of the story where some devotees were filming Srila Prabhupada speaking, and they're asking him all these questions and positioning the camera, and then they're arguing. Don't put the camera like that. You can't get any light that way. No, don't point the camera that way. The sun will come in and destroy the exposure. And the devotees are fighting and bickering. And then Srila Prabhupada just walks away. And at the end of the day, they open the camera and discover there's no film in there. Nothing was recorded. I had this experience in India with a friend of mine, Vidagdha Madhava. He used to record the teachings of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And devotees would come to me and they would ask me, well, what did Srila Sridhar Maharaj say? And I have a particular kind of I don't know, it's a good short-term memory, I think, for organizing arguments. And I can remember one by one, what were the points that Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, what were the stories he told. And so I would listen very carefully and sometimes even take notes. Srila Sridhar Maharaj stopped me from taking notes because he said, listen, while you're writing something down, I'm speaking, and what I'm saying will escape you. So don't write it down. Keep it in your mind. And I learned to do that. And one day he was giving a particularly fascinating talk. And I noticed my friend was paying attention to his recording. And I said, aren't you going to listen? He said, no, I'll listen to the talk later. I'm recording it. I said, oh, okay. And then later on, I saw him again, and I said, did you listen to that? Wasn't that a great talk? And he said, oh, there was some problem with the microphone. The wind was blowing, and the microphone didn't get anything. It was all distorted. So what's my point? While we're bickering over little things, we miss the big things. Atyahara prayasascha. You get involved in these big projects where you're going to do this and that, and then this, and then that, and then this and that. You get so lost in the details that you forget about your devotion, forget your love. So the same is true of ordinary, mundane love relationships. You think, I can't have a baby now because daddy needs to make more money. Mommy needs to make more money. But in order to make more money, you have to move to a different place or take on a different job. And so it goes. And pretty soon you're 32, you're 33, you're 34, and you're still afraid to get married, or you're still afraid to have that child because you're not ready yet. You have to do your project. So be careful with projects. They're very seductive. Rupa Goswami tells us, Atyahara prayasascha, prajalpo niyamagraha. Gossip. Watch out for gossip. You say something, I just told a story, I mentioned a name, now someone can say, oh, Mahayogi said such and such about so-and-so. that gets repeated. When it gets back to the original person, they feel defamed, they're angry, they feel insulted. Be careful. Be careful about how you use your speech. So these things are all there. And this is called pratikul, vinashaya. It destroys bhakti. Tyahara prayasasya prajalpamimara. Jana sangas chalolyams. Bad association. Shadbir bhakti vinashati. These things destroy bhakti. So now, having said all that, Srila Sridhar Maharaj moves into a different layer of what he calls pratikul. And he says here in the 17th verse of chapter 4 in this book, he says, Jamadi yoga sadhanasya varjaniyata. Jamadi yoga sadhanasya varjaniyata. He says, and this is very difficult for me to talk about. It's very difficult for me to say because, well, you'll see why. Just a moment. Yeah, I'm putting it on the screen for me to read. Yamadi yoga sadhanasya varjaniyata. He says, this trying to control the senses by yoga practice, this is also not such a good idea. All right, it's pratikul. It won't contribute to the proper cultivation of divine love. What? Yeah, so he says, watch out for yoga practice. Now, a lot of people don't like to hear this, and they won't like to hear me say this, but I'm trying to represent what's being spoken of in this book. And Srila Prabhupada, as we will see, confirms this. And Govinda Maharaj also. So to back his point, Srila Sridhar Maharaj says, Jamadi bir yoga patai, kama lova hatomuhu, mukunda sevaya yadvat, tatad atma nashamyati. This is a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, which explains that you may be able to control the mind and senses for some time through yoga practice. And this may help you to become relatively free from lust and greed, but it won't satisfy the soul. Only devotional service to Mukunda gives complete satisfaction to the soul. And I always come back to two things that Srila Sridhar Maharaj told me about my name. When I was a brahmachari, I had the name Mukunda Das, Mukunda Malavi Vilas Das. And I asked Srila Sridhar Maharaj about the meaning. He said, well, you know what Mukunda means, don't you? And I said, well, yeah, Krishna is the giver of liberation. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj shook his head. And he said, no, this means muktim kukuchit dadati, that Krishna is giving dadati, something that makes mukti, or liberation, kukuchit, which means ugly. Krishna gives something which, by comparison, makes sayuja mukti, or liberation by oneness with the Supreme, look very bad. I thought, wow, what a great explanation. So Prabhupada points out in his purport to this verse, he says, yoga, this is Srila Prabhupada commenting on this verse. This verse appears in the first canto of the Bhagavatam. Yoga aims at controlling the senses. Well, that's one of the aims of yoga. By practice of the mystic process of bodily exercise, in sitting, thinking, feeling, willing, concentrating, meditating, and at last being merged into transcendence. One can control the senses. So the yoga process involves 8 aspects. There's yama, which means rules. Excuse me. Yama and niyama. Niyama means what goes against the rules. And then there's dharana and dhyan, which means thinking, concentrating, meditating. Then there's asana, the sitting postures. And when people think of yoga, they think of the sitting postures. Asana, yama, niyama, dharana, dhyan. Then there's pranayama, controlling the breath, and pratyahara, which means avoiding things that are not favorable to the yoga process. And then there's dharana, dhyan, samadhi. Samadhi means entering into a trance, just to give an easy definition. Prabhupada says being merged into transcendence. Srila Prabhupada continues, he says the senses are considered like venomous serpents, and the yoga system is just to control them. On the other hand, Narada Muni recommends a different method for controlling the senses in the transcendental loving service of Mukunda, the personality of Godhead. By his experience, he says that devotional service to the Lord is more effective and practical than the system of artificially controlling the senses. In the service of Lord Mukunda, the senses are transcendentally engaged. So, for example, say you're the pujari and you're cooking in the kitchen. Well, your senses are engaged in properly preparing transcendental food for Krishna. And then you have to light the incense. So again, your sense of smell is engaged. You listen to the kirtan, so your hearing is engaged. You chant the Hare Krishna mantra, your speaking is engaged. Or you speak about Krishna and Krishna Bhakti, so your speaking is engaged. And in all these different engagements, the mind doesn't have so much time to focus on temptation. Last week, we told the story of Vishwamrita Muni, the Kshatriya who wanted to be a Brahmin by practicing severe penances and austerities. But because he had no higher taste, because he's simply relying on the artificial restraint of the senses through the Hatha Yoga process, he falls victim to the beauty of Menaka and is seduced by Menaka. We heard the story last week. Here, Srila Prabhupada in his purport, he points out that Haridas Thakur, on the other hand, was allured at midnight by the well-dressed Maya, and still she could not induce that great devotee into her trap. So Prabhupada explains the whole idea is that without devotional service of the Lord, neither the yoga system nor dry philosophical speculation can ever become successful. So as much as one relies on the yoga system to attain liberation, this is frowned upon by the Acharyas and by Srila Sri Rama. This particular verse of the Bhagavatam, it comes out of a conversation between Narada and Vyasadeva. So it's interesting to take a look at the conversation. It's in the first canto of the Bhagavatam. And Sutta Goswami is describing how Narada Muni came before Srila Vyasadeva when Srila Vyasadeva felt despondent after having delivered the Mahabharata to the world, he felt that his composition was insufficient and he couldn't come to terms with why. And at that time he prayed, and his Guru Dev, Narada Muni, appeared before him. And so Sutta Goswami, as he's describing this, he tells the Brahmins how Narada was born and how he became a Krishna conscious devotee. So Sutta Goswami here, he says, "O Brahmins, thus hearing all about Narada's birth and activities, Vyas, the avatar of Bhagavan and the son of Satyavati, inquired as follows. Vyasadeva said, 'Well, what did you do, Narada, after the departure of the great sages who had instructed you in scientific transcendental knowledge from the beginning of your present birth? O son of Brahma, how did you pass your life after your initiation? And how did you attain this particular body, having quit your old one in due course?' O great sage," Vyasadeva continues, he says, "time annihilates everything in due course. So how is it that this subject matter, which happened prior to this day of Brahma, is still fresh in your memory, undisturbed by time?" And so Narada Muni turns to Vyasadeva, his disciple, and he says, "The great sages who had imparted scientific knowledge of transcendence to me departed for other places, and I had to pass my life in this way. I was the only son of my mother, who was not only a simple woman, but a maidservant. Since I was her only child, she had no other choice for protection. She bound me with a tie of affection. She wanted to look after me, but because she was not independent, she couldn't do anything for me. This world, Vyasadeva, is under the full control of God himself. Therefore, everyone is like a wooden puppet in the hands of the puppet master. And so it was that when I was a child of 5 years, I lived in a school of Brahmanas. I was dependent on my mother's affection and had no experience of the world. And once upon a time, my poor mother, when she went out one night to milk a cow, she was bitten on the leg by a snake, influenced by supreme time. And I took this as a special mercy of the Lord, who always wants blessings for his devotees. And so thinking, I started for the north. I passed big cities, towns, villages, farms, mines, valleys, gardens, natural forests. I passed through hills and mountains full of reservoirs of gold, silver, copper, and various tracts of land with water filled with beautiful lotus flowers, fit for the residents of heaven, decorated with bees and singing birds. I passed through forests of bamboo reeds, sharp grass, weeds, and caves, which are very difficult to go through alone. I visited deep, dark, and dangerously fearful forests, the play yards of snakes, owls, and jackals. And thus traveling, I felt tired, both in body and soul, and I was thirsty and hungry. So I took bath in a river lake and drank water. And by contacting water, I was relieved from my exhaustion. There, under the shadow of a banyan tree in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the supersoul situated within, using my inner voice as I had learned from liberated souls. And as I began meditating on the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with my mind transformed in transcendental love, tears rolled down my eyes. And suddenly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, appeared on the lotus of my heart. Oh, Vyas, at that time, overpowered by joy and bliss, every part of my body became alive, absorbed in an ocean of ecstasy. I couldn't see myself or the Lord. The vision disappeared. Now, the transcendental form of the Lord satisfies the heart's desire and erases all mental problems. But losing that form, I suddenly got up, being disturbed. I wanted to see that transcendental form of the Lord again, just as when we're in the Ratayatra festival, everyone is chanting, Jagannatha Swami Nayana Patugami Bhava Tume. Bhava Tume means manifest yourself before me. Or in the song, My Sweet Lord by George Harrison, George Harrison sings, I really want to see you, Lord. So Narada Muni had this vision, but then it disappeared. So he tried concentrating again. He wanted to see that vision again, but I could not see him anymore, and thus dissatisfied, I was much aggrieved. Seeing my attempts in that lonely place, Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to all mundane description, spoke to me with gravity and pleasing words, just to mitigate my grief. So again, hearing is seeing, as we were saying at the beginning of our talk. Now, Narada had a vision of God, but now he can't see God. But he can hear. And Krishna says, Oh, Narada, I regret that during this lifetime, you will never be able to see me again. Those who are incomplete in service, who are not completely free from all material taints, can hardly see me. So this is what's under discussion in the 4th chapter of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's book, Prapana Jivanamrita. How to become free from these sort of material taints, or pratikulyasya varjanam. Krishna says, "O virtuous one." So it's interesting. He says, well, you're not completely free from all material taints, but you are virtuous. But to be virtuous is not enough. We're looking for divine love. Oh, virtuous one, you've only seen once my person, and this is just to increase your desire for me. Because the more you hanker for me, the more you will be freed from all material desires. By service of God, even for a few days, a devotee attains firm and fixed intelligence in me. So the question becomes, how do we serve God? Well, we serve God by serving the servants. We find someone who's more adept in the service to God and try to follow that person. Consequently, Krishna continues, he goes on to become my associate in the transcendental world after giving up the present deplorable material worlds. Intelligence engaged in my devotion cannot be thwarted at any time, even at the time of creation, as well as at the time of annihilation. Your remembrance will continue by my mercy. So when someone is exposed to Krishna consciousness, as opposed to other forms of God consciousness, but one has a glimpse of Krishna by hearing and by serving his associates and servants, then your intelligence becomes engaged in Krishna consciousness, and you will never lose that taste, no matter what comes to you, no matter what kind of temptation you're exposed to, or unfavorable activities you may get involved with. In the back of your mind, in your heart of hearts, you will always remember that touch of pure Krishna consciousness, that vision of the Absolute. Narada then continues his talk to Vyasadeva. He says, then that supreme authority personified by sound and unseen by eyes, but most wonderful, stopped speaking. So it's possible to hear the voice of God. Perhaps when we're still in a very neophyte stage, we do our best to remind ourselves of Krishna by visiting the deity. But we remember that darshan means when you go to the temple, God is seeing you, not that you're seeing God. It's very difficult to see what is transcendental to the mind and senses with our vegetable eyes. Feeling a sense of gratitude, I offered my obeisances unto him, Narada continues, bowing my head. So Narada says, thus I began chanting the holy name and fame of the Lord by repeated recitations, ignoring all the formalities of the material world. Such chanting and remembering of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are benedictory. So doing, I traveled all over the earth, fully satisfied, humble, and unenvious. So this is the point that we're making, that full satisfaction, real ananda, does not come from hatha yoga. It does not come from a sense of merging with the divine. It comes through being absorbed in Krishna, becoming free from material taints, chanting the holy name, having been awarded. And in this way, because the question of Vyas was, how did you come to this transcendental body of Narada Muni playing a divine instrument, the veena, looks like a sitar, and traveling throughout the universe? How did you come to this divine body? He says, well, having been awarded a transcendental body befitting an associate of the personality of Godhead, I quit the body made of 5 material elements, and thus all karma stopped. At the end of the millennium, when Lord Narayana lay down within the water of devastation, Brahma began to enter into him with all creative elements, and I also entered through his breathing. After 4,300,000 solar years, when Brahma awoke to create again by the will of the Lord, all the rishis like Marichi, Angira, Atri, and so on were created from the transcendental body of the Lord, and I also appeared along with them. Since then, by the grace of the Almighty Vishnu, I travel everywhere without restriction, both in the transcendental world and in the 3 divisions of the material world. This is because I am fixed in unbroken devotional service of the Lord, and thus I travel, constantly singing the transcendental message of the glories of the Lord, vibrating this instrument called a veena, which is charged with transcendental sound and which was given to me by Lord Krishna. The Supreme Lord Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart. This is called for as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. So here, Narada is encouraging Vyas, because Vyas is despondent after having composed Mahabharata, because his version of Krishna in Mahabharata doesn't sing the glories of Krishna as he is found in Vrindavan, the highest aspects of beauty above power, divine love. Then Narada Muni, he's telling Vyas, do this. You should do this. Do like me. Chant the glories of Krishna. He wants Vyas to write the book that we're reading now, which is called the Srimad Bhagavatam. So he tells him, it's personally experienced by me that those who are always full of cares and anxieties, due to desiring contact of the senses with their objects, can cross the ocean of nescience on a most suitable boat. The constant chanting of the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. So he's saying this is better than liberation. You'll really experience the highest form of transcendental bliss through divine love. And love is personal. Love means there's a lover and there's the beloved. whereas Sayuja Mukti, merging into the oneness, there's nothing. There's very little space between the infinity and the zero. Zero is Buddhism. The infinite is Shankaracharya's Sayuja Mukti. So what's the difference between zero and the infinite? Zero divided by zero is zero. Zero times zero is zero. Infinite divided by infinite is still infinite. But while there is the satisfaction of eternal life, there is a lack of infinite divine love, which is only found through this relationship with the personality of Godhead. And in this world, because it's so difficult to see God, how do you connect with the holy name? By vibrating that sound. So then we come to the verse that we were studying this morning, which says, one may attempt to control the mind by practicing restraint of the senses by the yoga system. One can get relief from the disturbances of desire and lust, but this is not sufficient to give satisfaction to the soul, for this satisfaction is derived from devotional service to the personality of Godhead. So he's telling Vyas, yes, of course you couldn't find complete satisfaction. You're a yogi. You're very highly qualified. You've understood the principle of meditation and samadhi. You're Vyasadeva. He wrote the book. But I'm telling you, you need to vibrate the holy name of Krishna. You need to vibrate the glories of Krishna. So do that. Write the Bhagavatam. And it's interesting because in Hindu mysticism, there's a thing called the Gayatri Mantra. And the Gayatri Mantra is explained by Srila Sridhar Maharaj, gives us a very high idea of the ontology of Vaishnavism. But it's not easily grasped. It's not so easily understood. So the Bhagavatam, as written by Vyas, is considered to be the natural commentary on the Gayatri Mantra. So if you're chanting the Gayatri Mantra, Om Bhur Bhuva Sva Tat Savitur, and you want to enter into the real meaning of the Gayatri Mantra, then you have to read the Srimad Bhagavatam, because after being chastised by his Guru Dev, Narada Muni, then Vyasadeva looks for inspiration within, and the inspiration comes. And even then, Vyasadeva himself doesn't so much speak the Bhagavatam as it is spoken by Shukadev. There's a very nice verse somewhere that says, I think it's Narada Muni, he says, I know, Shuka, he knows. Vyas, he may or may not know. Vyasa veti na veti va. Vyasa himself, he may not really understand the purport of the Bhagavatam. Srila Sridhar Maharaj used to like to quote that verse. It's Lord Shiva. Yeah. Aham ved mi shuko veti. Srila Sridhar Maharaj loved this verse. Aham ved mi shuko veti, vyaso veti na veti va. Lord Shiva, he says, I may know. Shukadev Goswami, son of Vyasadeva, he may know. Vyaso veti na veti va. Vyasadeva may know or may not know the Srimad Bhagavatam. On the whole, Bhaktya Bhagavatam grayam na budya na chatikaya. On the whole, you can't understand the Bhagavatam through buddhi, by so-called intelligence or experimental knowledge, neither by tika, by commentaries, especially imaginative commentaries. Aham ved mi shuko veti, vyaso veti na veti va. It's a very interesting shloka. It means you don't always know what you have. When you create a work of literature, a work of art, when you create poetry, a song, even when Holy Scripture passes through you, you may not entirely understand what just came through you. Very interesting shloka. Hum ved mi shkoved. Anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there. So that's the nutshell of that particular shloka. Now, I had some instruction from Madhusudan Maharaj. She said, don't go too fast. You don't have to run through this verse after verse. Don't try to do 20 verses in one go. So what fascinates me about Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and I am his disciple, what has fascinated me about him for these 40 years or so, there he is that his thinking, it's very concentrated. I gave the example last week of neem oil. It's, if you're cultivating Tulsi at all, neem oil is especially good for those little white flies that appear, they're devilish to get rid of. And what you do is you can buy it on Amazon.com. You buy a liter of pure neem oil, and you put a teaspoon of neem oil, a teaspoon of liquid detergent, and a liter of warm water. Mix it up in a little spray bottle, and you can spray your Tulsi plant, and those little white flies will disappear. And it's interesting that neem helps Tulsi, because we call Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Nimai. He was born underneath a neem tree. But my point is, that oil, it's so concentrated that you just need a little tiny amount. So Srila Sridhar Maharaj's thought, his teaching, it's concentrated like that. You just need a little drop, and you can put that. The homeopathic medicine works like that. It's a homeopathic idea. Srila Govinda Maharaj treated Srila Sridhar Maharaj with homeopathic medicine. One day, it's a famous story, everyone knows. Srila Govinda Maharaj was at the Ganges meditating. How do I help Srila Sridhar Maharaj? He has this health problem. What can I do? There must be some medicine. And he heard this sound, Kalifas. So he went to different doctors, and he asked them, have you ever heard of Kalifas? Does that mean anything to you? And they shook their heads, no. He went to a homeopathic doctor, and he said, yes, we have Kalifas. And he administered that to Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and it helped him. Then the idea of homeopathic medicine is curious, because you take an active ingredient and you immerse it, one drop of that, you immerse that into a swimming pool of water. And then you take one drop from that and you immerse it into another swimming pool of water. And if you really want a powerful product, you do that again. Now, I don't understand how that works. And when I was in Australia, I had a terrible cold, and I took homeopathic medicine and put it on my tongue. It did nothing. My cough got worse. They told me, well, you have to continue with the therapy. I don't know. But the idea that you can take a drop of Srila Sridhar Maharaj's tonic, and that's what Amrita is, it's tonic. It's a medicine. You can take a drop of this medicine and then dilute it and see what happens. Oh, it will expand. And you'll say, oh, wait a minute, look, there's the Upadeshamrita of Rupa Goswami. There's the Srimad Bhagavatam. There's the Bhagavad Gita. There's the Mukundamala Stotram of King Kulashekara. There's the Stotra Ratnam. It's all there. That's why I love Srila Sridhar Maharaj's teachings in this book, because I can take one idea that he gave me. Die to live. I remember sitting in front of him, and he would just keep repeating that like a mantra. He would, Dayal Nitai, Dayal Nitai, die to live. The hair on my body would stand on. What does he mean? die till, am I supposed to die now? Shall I die for Krishna or live for Krishna? Or by living for Krishna, do I die in my materialistic life and live again? Is he talking about resurrection? Or is this Hegel's thesis, antithesis, synthesis all over again? You know, so I've been thinking 40 years about die to live. And another person who was quite taken by Srila Sridhar Maharaj's presence, his voice, his teaching, was Srila Govinda Maharaj. And, you know, he stayed by his side for years and years, absorbed everything he could. And we're all very fortunate to have had his association. I was fortunate in my lifetime to have the association of His Divine Grace, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, and then very concentrated service with His Divine Grace Bhakti Rakshak Srila Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj, and then also to have association and friendship with His Divine Grace Srila Sridhar Maharaj, Srila Govinda Bhakti Sundar Govinda Maharaj, his esteemed disciple. So I feel very fortunate. I wish I had taken better advantage of that, or I wish I was capable of taking better advantage of that now. But I thank all of you for giving me a chance to do a little bit of service here, trying to repeat a few words I heard and read a couple of shlokas here and there, you know. But in the end, what is it? Shuko, aham vedmi, shuko veti, shuko veti, aham vedmi. I may know, Shuka may know, Vyasa, he may or may not know. So the Vyasa, who is he? He's the writer of the Vedas. Are you kidding? He's the most powerful. He's the top of the guru chain. You know, he's the head of the Sampradaya. How can you say he doesn't know? Shukadev Goswami, he's not in the Sampradaya. He's not on the list of gurus. Why not? Well, he's a bit of an avadut. You know, he's a naked 16-year-old boy. You can't put him in charge of a temple. You know, he's wandering through the forest. He's incoherent. You can't really talk to him. He's an avadut. He can't be the head of the Sampradaya, but Vyasa's. But here Lord Shiva is saying, well, you know, Vyasa, he's okay. You know, he kind of knows something. But the point is something passed through him. So, you know, you can be more than who you are by channeling something higher, by letting the higher power move through you. And that's not impossible. That's what avatar is. Avatar means somehow something goes through you. You're not entirely in control of it. You called it down. Advaita Acharya, he's an avatar. He calls Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu down. Come on, we need you now. Everything is getting really bad. Teach him to chant Hare Krishna. He comes down. So, Advaita Acharya, he's Sada Shiva. Shiva says, Aham Vedmi Shuko Veti. I kind of know what it is. Shuka, I bet he knows. Vyas may or may not know. So what do I know? Not much, but if you gather together and tell me, okay, Mahayogi, do it. Come on. We're going to squeeze you now. Come on. Then, yeah, maybe. So thank you all very much. Marie Ugorik of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. We all wish you the best. Jivana Didi, Strasvitya Kakvi Bujayacha. That's all my Russian. Ochan Priyatna, there you go. Leela Sundari, Krishna Chaitanya, you're right. Shopping kills bhakti. That's the #1 bhakti killer in the universe. Don't do it. Stay away from shopping. Kirtida Didi, Nanda 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 Nanda. Galaxy A12 is out there. We're zooming to Galaxy 8. I don't know where Galaxy A12 is. Do you? It's somewhere in Zoom Loca. And there's Ramananda. I can't believe I'm so blessed to be able to share a few moments with my old friend, devoted Pujari cook, Ramananda Prabhu, G.A., and there's Lilavati Didi again, Ananta Shesh, Haribol, ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estás? Dana Ka. In Spanish, that would be Dana Ka. There he is. Ananta Shesh, he's driving in his car, but he's not going to miss the talk. Hey, Hare Krishna Prabhu, good to see you. Es bueno verte, es un gusto. And there's Dana K, but in Spanish, they would say Danaka. And that sounds like Sanskrit, doesn't it? Danaka, the Danavas and the Danakas. Okay, any questions from anybody? We covered our hour.
Jai Mahayugi Prabhu ki Jai.
That's it. Okay, I have to go. When she does that, I have to go. Gaura Bhakta.
No.
Gaura
Mahayugi
Bhakta
Prabhu,
Vrinda
no.
Ki Jai. Let me see. Yeah, you're telling me that's it. Get off.
No,
you know.
no, simply I'm always afraid that you can turn off Zoom and I will have no time to say it.
Okay, all right. It's time for us to zoom out of here. And,
No.
Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. We'll see you all
Jai.
next week. I'll try to do more than one verse next week. But think
Don't
about
be
it.
in a rush.
No hatha yoga for you, and no shopping. That's the big takeaway. No shopping and no yoga. Bye-bye. Adios. Hare Krishna.
Bye-bye. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for joining us. See you next week with Accept Our Dandavat. Спасибо. Всем спасибо за то, что присоединились. Харе Кришна, Дандават. Увидимся на следующей неделе. Примите поклоны, пожалуйста.